This video was sponsored by Ground News. More from them in a bit. A while back, I made a video about my thoughts on video game journalism. And I talked about how I don't really feel like this stuff is about video games or really journalism. Like, it's bad. It's really bad. I don't like it, and most people don't like it. But you know, for as popular as it is to clown on gaming journalism nowadays, I don't see a lot of people making fun of another annoying niche of the journalism: business. Tech journalism. There's a lot of websites out there dedicated to covering tech news and rumors and speculation, reviews, and so forth. And because of the nature of what I do here on this channel, sitting in this pool alone, I find myself spending a lot of time reading the various articles and op-eds that these sites will post. And after some consideration, I think that journalists are really bad at covering technology. Now, maybe I'm generalizing a bit. There are a few journalists out there doing really good work, uncovering breaking news and holding big tech accountable for their egregious sins. There are journalists whose opinions I respect and writers who generally will offer good insight into the world of technology. But for the most part, it's just garbage. There's a lot of terrible websites. There's a lot of journalists who seem like they're just bloggers with an ego. And to be honest, I'm not entirely sure how most of these sites are even still around. Which, considering how fast gaming journalism seems to be dying, it's entirely possible that these sites won't exist by the time you watch this. Who knows? But I'm gonna complain about them anyway. And speaking of technology journalism, let's check out a story about NBC using an AI version of Al Michaels' voice for the Olympics coverage. Ground News pulled together over 61 sources on this story, and I can compare how the bias and political leaning of each source affects the framing of this story. I noticed this trend a lot, but generally left-leaning sources tend to be more negative towards AI. A few stories will just straight out call it creepy. Center-leaning sources are a bit better about this, just presenting the information in a generally less biased way. But then again, there's a few here that go way out of their way to hype people up about the technology, which I would call creepy. Ground News gives me the details about the credibility and funding of each source. And this is very, very helpful for getting the full picture of a story. Look, I love Ground News. I don't want the news to tell me what I should think. I want the news to inform me so I can come to my own conclusions. My favorite feature to tell people about is Blind Spot, because it specifically shows you stories that one side or the other conveniently ignores at that given moment. So go try Ground News today and get 40% off the Vantage plan by going to ground.news/husk. Quick recap on the ethics of what is considered good journalism. Generally speaking, the news should try and be objective. It should focus on facts, try to inform rather than sway people's opinions. Now, for an example of bad journalism, let's just go check out what IGN is doing, and wow, that was fast. VP candidate Tim Walz was a big Dreamcast fan, and we think we found his favorite game. Okay, so this is clickbait 101. Politics are divisive, extremely so in the US right now, and a large portion of IGN's audience base is going to be from the US. You might be wondering, why would IGN make an entire article just speculating on what a vice president candidate's favorite game may or may not be? And that's because the article is not really about video games. It's not even about politics, and it's certainly not journalism. The goal here is not to inform people, they just want to get a lot of clicks. And considering the number of comments on this article compared to others posted in the same time period, they probably did get a lot of clicks. Yeah, this worked. Most of the comments are going to be exactly what you expect. Lots of political debates, people complaining that this article isn't actually about video games and it's just rage baiting the readers into clicking on it, which is pretty interesting when you think about it. When it comes to gaming news and gaming journalism, readers are so used to these clickbait tactics. It's so commonplace that people will call them out while still clicking on the article. The general rules to get clicks are talk about politics, make an unpopular opinion the focus of an op-ed, or just try and start a controversy. If you do this, you'll make a lot of money. This is why gaming journalism is the way it is. But in tech journalism, the rules are actually kind of different. Whereas gaming journalism is fine if their audience despises them, tech journalism doesn't really want that. They want people to click on their articles, so they might click on the products in those articles and then use the affiliate links to buy those things in those articles. So they can't just constantly rage bait their audience. I mean, they could do it, it's just not gonna be as effective in the long run. They still do manipulate the audience, they do still have bad practices and bad journalism, but it's all a lot more subtle. Let me explain all of this by talking about vacuum cleaners. What if I want to know if like a vacuum cleaner is good? Where do I go for that? I'll admit it, I don't know a whole lot about vacuum cleaners. And the only time I'd ever care about vacuum cleaner reviews is when I'm looking for vacuum cleaners to buy. I am out of my depth. I know nothing about this stuff. I don't know the difference between a Dyson and a Tyson or anything in between. I just have to assume that the reviewers of vacuum cleaners do know their stuff. So forgive me if I get a bit worried when I see what appears to be a massive conflict of interest from a lot of these review sites. Okay, so if you actually Google best vacuum cleaners, you will find this article by TechRadar. TechRadar, it's a pretty well-known tech website. It's got tech in the name. And I'll admit, I have no idea if any of these vacuums mentioned are good or not good. Now, with that said, it does seem a bit convenient to me that the #1 pick by TechRadar also happens to be the same vacuum that they have promotional deals for. A vacuum that they will receive commissions from when you buy it, that they personally financially benefit from when you listen to their opinion. And I start to wonder, is this actually a review or is this just an ad? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, so to be fair, this and just about every other website will have disclaimers saying that they might receive commissions and often list a number of agencies that hold them accountable. They will continually remind you that they are not swayed by money, unlike every other corporation on the planet. Here's my thing. Your #1 pick has that commission page and coupon deals right there, but conveniently your #2 option doesn't? And like, let's look at these vacuums. Why is this thing the best overall? It's a cordless vacuum, right? Like, they even admit in the article it's not as powerful as a normal vacuum. So while I could see it being the best cordless, it seems bizarre to say it's the best overall, and it's weird to put a product that I would describe as somewhat niche right at the very top. And also, the #1 vacuum has a lower review score than the #2 vacuum. Again, convenient. And that's just assuming that the reviewers even know what makes a good vacuum cleaner good. But what if they were just as uninformed as I am? So a while back, there was this big controversy about The Verge. They made a video showing off how to build a PC. And the guy who was building the PC did a lot of things wrong. The Verge got a lot of flack for this. They took the video down, but come on, there's a problem here. You are The Verge, a website focused on covering technology. You're presenting this guy like he's some expert PC builder. Apparently, they decided that this man was the most qualified staff member to do this job, and he simply wasn't. Don't you ever get the sense that the writers that work for a lot of these websites don't seem to actually know that much about the things they're writing about? These websites are getting worse. And it's not just the commissions or the money or the rage baiting. One of the biggest issues I have about tech journalism is honestly the lack of tech. Now, I suppose I can't put the blame of this entirely on the journalist. You know, even I'm starting to feel it, like consumer electronics today is just kind of boring. It's not as interesting as it used to be. Back in the day, you'd have, you know, computers are getting smaller and thinner and exponentially faster. But nowadays, I just can't bring myself to get hyped up about a new smart ring or an AI pin. Like, yeah, I could buy a phone that folds in half, or I could buy a phone that doesn't do that. It is hard for me to get excited for the new computer chip that is 10 to 15% more efficient than last year's new computer chip. I would consider myself to be somebody who actually appreciates new tech advancements and reading about this kind of stuff, and I think it's boring. So I can only imagine how apathetic the average non-tech obsessed person is feeling towards all of this nowadays. And this means less news. or at least less interesting news. So without that stuff, these consumer electronics websites are increasingly relying on consumerism. Like, most of these websites are just ads. They're just ads to buy stuff. Websites that used to discuss, like, I don't know, new memory bandwidth advancements or shrinking semiconductor transistors, now just talk about hot new deals from Best Buy on smart dog food dispensers. Who cares about the tech news? Let's hear what new slop is streaming on Amazon Prime this month. According to Google, Digital Trends is about tech news, reviews, deals, and how-tos. And yeah, I'm sure sometimes they do talk about tech. The keyword being sometimes. Digital Trends uniquely bothers me. Like, it just doesn't seem to talk about tech news that much at all. Okay, so a few days ago, here's the trending tab I saw on the site. And apparently what was trending at that moment was Spider-Man 4, the direct sequel to Spider-Man 3, starring Tobey Maguire. You might be wondering, what is happening with Spider-Man 4 starring Tobey Maguire? Oh, I guess nothing's happening. How compelling. What's even more bizarre is, how is Spider-Man 4 trending if this article was written like 5 months ago? This isn't even a non-story. You just made something up. And I get blasted by 3 ads all at once. To be fair, yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with tech, but also this doesn't have anything to do with tech. But it should, because it's a technology website. You might be thinking that the problem here is that these journalists just don't care enough about the tech they cover. But sometimes, actually the problem is that they care way too much. You probably know that fanboys are a thing that exist. People that wholeheartedly devote themselves and obsess over a corporation or a brand. You might have seen people fight about the Xbox versus the PlayStation online, or maybe they celebrate when the iPhone or Android sells more iPhones or Androids. It's a thing that people do for some reason, I don't know. And a lot of the journalists who do actually care about technology, which is a good thing, also seem to have really strong preferences and opinions about brands that kind of border on fanboyism, which is a bad thing. I'm going to say something that will shock you. There are fanboys of Microsoft. I'm not talking about people who are like fans of the Xbox game console, or just prefer Windows to Mac, or just like PC gaming, or people who like the aesthetic of early Windows. I'm talking about people who specifically like the direction and products of modern Microsoft. Unironically, there are websites for these people. There are journalists who fall into this category. And apparently early 2024 was a really exciting time for them. See, Microsoft was preparing to announce new ARM-based Windows laptops. If you know what that means, good for you. For the average person, really not that big of a deal. For these Microsoft groupies though, this was seen as like the big moment that would change everything. See, Microsoft actually makes their own computers called the Surface line. And I guess there's been a long-standing rivalry between the fanboys of the Surface laptops and the Apple-produced MacBooks. However, this rivalry's been kind of a one-way fight as far as I can gather, because most people know what a MacBook is, and almost nobody knows what a Surface is. So to these Microsoft fan groups, this new ARM-based Surface laptop and this new line of computers would change everything. Microsoft would be seen as the superior computer manufacturer or something like that. But this didn't happen. Turns out a lot of this was just promoting an AI line of computers. A lot of AI garbage that most people really don't care about. However, Microsoft did manage to get into the news for a bit. Not because people like the new laptops, but because of backlash over one of their AI features called Recall. See, Microsoft announced that these computers would have the ability to screenshot everything that you do every few seconds. And then you could use some AI wacky stuff to go back through all that information and search the history of your entire computer. People were a little bit concerned. Like, is this taking pictures of my bank accounts? my usernames, my passwords? Where's that information going? Microsoft claimed that all of this was going to be stored on the user's device locally, and nobody should worry about stuff like privacy or potential malicious use of this data. But see, a lot of people didn't believe them, because they're Microsoft. It was pretty obvious, I think, to everybody that something was wrong here, except for the few journalists who decided that this was the hill worth dying on. But there were websites defending this recall thing, saying it was actually great and everybody that disagreed was ignorant of the technology or scared of change. And there'd be a back and forth fight between some of these journalists and normal people. But of course, after a few days, actual professional privacy researchers announced that there were massive issues with the recall service. It was not secure, and Microsoft was forced to delay this whole thing. How embarrassing. After this all happened, as far as I could tell, most of the journalists didn't say, oopsie, we got this one wrong. There was no apology post. They just presented the new information like it was something they believed in the whole time. One of those problems with tech journalism is corporate favoritism. And there's one website where this has been going on for a long time. If you've ever Googled what GPU or CPU is better, or tried to compare computer parts, you might have encountered the website userbenchmark.com. The site is supposed to let you compare PC parts, graphic cards and processors, but the more you dive into all of this, you start to notice that a few things are really off. Now look, I don't know about the legitimacy of the benchmarks or numbers provided, but the commentary and opinions provided for these cards, it's absolutely bizarre. For whatever reason, the website has a massive grudge against AMD GPUs and CPUs. This might come as a surprise, but just like people will argue about Xbox versus PlayStation, PC gamers can have strong loyalties to AMD or Nvidia, or in the case of this website, I guess Intel. Really picked the losing side on that one, didn't ya? Like look at this excerpt. Following an already pretty biased review for this computer part, the website says, also watch out for AMD's army of Neanderthal social media accounts on Reddit, forums, and YouTube. What did AMD do to you? This isn't like a one-time thing either. A lot of these reviews are just absolutely brutal towards AMD for what seems to be no good reason. And looking online, I guess that the issues with the site, its biases, it's actually pretty common knowledge in PC building circles. Most people seem to agree that the site is pretty trash, and many are confused at why this specific website is one of the first results that comes up when you look for graphic card comparisons. Like, look, I don't care what brand of computer card you buy, because I don't know, I think that's an odd thing to care about, just in my opinion. But imagine how many people have ended up buying like an Intel CPU or Nvidia GPU solely because of this website's opinions. Not because it was the best choice for them, but because userbenchmark.com presents themselves as an authority on the subject while interjecting their own biases rather than just presenting the facts. But things can and still and could and can and does and will get worse. For as bad as the websites that care too much about tech and companies can be, it's far more common that you run into the exact opposite issue. Websites that just don't care at all. So in 2022, CNN wrote an article about how real estate is a booming industry within the metaverse. Yeah. To be fair, this article is a bit old, but it still hurts to read. So the author interviews a lot of people who run companies selling real estate in the metaverse, but the writer isn't really aware that the metaverse doesn't exist. I mean, they know that there's different platforms, but they don't seem to know that this is just different applications that have no traction in the larger tech world. But the oblivious author to this article seems to believe that there's like a connected digital world that a lot of people are spending their real time and money in. This is one of the worst pieces of journalism I've ever seen. Like, they just accept these quotes from people who sell metaverse real estate, and they don't ask any questions or provide even basic insight. It's so painful how little the author seems to know or care to ask about this. Like, they quote a consulting firm that claims that e-commerce in the metaverse could have up to a $2.6 trillion market impact by 2030. Wonder how that's going. Let's just read a little bit from this article. LandVault claims to be the biggest land developer in the metaverse, renting its land to brands and developing campaigns for them. Just don't call it advertising. They spelled advertising wrong. Insists CEO Sam Huber. In Web3, the word actually doesn't have a place, he said. What we're building is not advertising, spelled incorrectly. It's brand experiences, which is very different. And like, there's no pushback here from the writer. They're so far out of their element, so absolutely uninformed about what they're covering that they can't be skeptical because they're clearly learning about what all of this means while writing the article. The CNN journalist just takes the word of these metaverse land developers that this thing is definitely a thing that people definitely care about. There's no suggestion that this might ever go away, that this might be a fad. The people who profit off of this seem to suggest that while prices could go down, you know, it'll just ebb and flow like the actual real estate market. And the journalist just takes their word for it. Now, this is just one example, but there's so many out there. When major news organizations try and cover technology, it's usually really painful to read because it's clear how little research or effort goes into covering these stories. And this always makes me start to wonder, much like the vacuum cleaner reviews, maybe modern journalism is just this. Uninformed takes by people who don't really know a whole lot about anything except for how to get clicks. Wait, what if that's what the entire internet is? Makes you think. Huge thanks to Ground News for sponsoring this video. I think it's a really important service that I use many times a day, and you can try it right now and get 40% off the Vantage plan by going to ground.news/husk.